Hello, everyone. So, I'm back today to talk about the wounding of home, which, for a lot of people who have dealt with generational trauma, mother wound, father wound, um, you know, familial abuse, there is a wounding of home that's present. And typically, what happens with this wounding of home is you tend to feel like you've never really had, a real home, right? Because home was never a safe environment or an environment where you felt secure or protected or like you belonged. And when your foundation is set up in that way, right? When that's what your childhood looks like, what ends up happening is you end up not feeling at home within yourself either, because it's not established for you. And so there ends up being this really, really big wound around the concept of home, right? And you end up, or you can end up, looking for home, right? This concept of home in all the wrong places. So it tends to produce what I would call runners, right? People who are constantly looking for home in people and locations and circumstances, because they've never really had it. And so it can produce avoidant personalities, who tend to, like, never fully plant or put down roots, right? And so people who are kind of more transient, right, where they're kind of moving from thing to thing and place to place, and that can show up, in romantic relationships. It can show up in jobs, in the workplace. It can show up in even, like, just where you choose to live, right? And so, yeah, folks end up or tend to seek home outside of themselves, without recognizing that the only place you can truly ever find home is number one, within God, and number two, within yourself. And so, yeah, until you get to a point and a place where you recognize that truth, you're kind of like living life on a treadmill, on a conveyor belt, right? Where you're just always moving, and always trying to find home within other people, places, and things, when in reality, you gotta first find it within a higher power and then find it within yourself. And yeah, for me personally, even with my wounding, I had a really good dad. And so I had a sense of home. And I think this is what really kept me stabilized for most of my childhood. I found a sense of home in my father. There was definitely a sense of home within him. And he helped to establish, like, my foundation and, parts of my identity as a younger person. And then he ended up dying, right? He died 10, 11 years ago, this year actually. And upon his death, right, once he left, things went left, because my sense of home and my sense of identity had been rooted in something outside of myself. It had been rooted in him. And so I think at that point, I really came to the understanding, and it really started to show up in every area of my life, the wounding around home and this sense of homelessness, right? I'm realizing now that I was homeless before I was homeless, right? I was homeless spiritually, emotionally, and psychologically before I ever became physically homeless. And that spiritual, emotional, psychological homelessness was something that I was kind of always battling without even realizing that that's what I was battling. And yeah, I looked for home in so many different places. And fortunately, not like the most horrible or negative places. Although codependence is like problematic, but I looked for home in like school groups and like organizations and jobs and for me even locations. And it's interesting because I went to high school with a person who kind of called me out on this early in my journey and my life. And it didn't really click for me at that time. I can look back on it now and see like how it applied. I would travel a lot. I was transient, right? Just didn't want to put down roots, was always kind of jumping from place to place and running from myself effectively. And this person actually said that to me. They were like, what are you running from? With all of this traveling and going here and going there, like, what are you running from? Like, what are you looking for? And it didn't really resonate because I had yet to come to the realization around, like, my wounding with home. I knew that my home environment wasn't healthy, the healthiest or the safest or the best, but I hadn't figured out everything that I just kind of laid out. And so, yeah, this person said this to me. This is like 10 years ago. And I thought about it. I did think. And I did. At that time, my home life wasn't good. I was living at my father's mother's house. And I wasn't happy living there. It wasn't what I would consider to be an ideal, like, arrangement or situation. And I didn't want to be there. So I was always on the go, going somewhere else. And I had this pattern of when I would move, right? So when I did move out from my grandmother's house into like my own place with roommates, I would not unpack my stuff, which, when I look back on it, is very telling because, like, who moves into a place and keeps their stuff in boxes? I did. And part of that was, the not putting down roots and being on this constant search and quest for a place called home. Moving into places that didn't quite feel like home for me, or that I didn't recognize I could turn into or, set up as my home. And so yeah, I would literally live out of boxes and just this like unsettled way of living and being. And yeah, I looked for home in relatives. I looked for home in my father's sister. Because of my relationship with my mother being so toxic and dysfunctional and her not feeling like home for me. Everywhere but where I actually needed to be looking for it. And interestingly enough, I came to the realization through this homelessness experience, like physical homelessness experience that I'm in right now, that for a really long time, I wanted my mother to be a solution to this problem. And I thought she was a solution. I thought her changing and her being a better and different mom was going to provide me with the healing around the sense of homelessness. And the realization that I came to just recently, like through this last couple of weeks, is that pretty much what I just said, that you never get that outside of yourself. You never establish that separate from you outside of God, right? You don't establish that through other people. And the reason being that people are going to come and go, right? The same way that my father transitioned out of my life 11 years ago, and because he was my sense of home and I lost him, I then felt homeless and, without identity, because everything that I was and my foundation had been so firmly rooted in him. I came to recognize that, like, trying to use my mother as a solution to this problem is actually not the solution. That's actually not the best way to go. And not only is it not the best way to go, but it's impossible. It's impossible to establish, like, a truly sustainable, right? Something that's going to stand the test of time, sense of home outside of yourself and God and other people. And like finding a sense of home within yourself, I would say, for me anyway, which is what I'm doing right now, is the next step after finding a sense of home in God and in something greater than yourself, right? Establishing God and Source as that anchor, and rooting yourself in that eternal thing that's never going to leave you, never going to go anywhere, always going to be present, is really how this is done. And then once you establish and anchor yourself in God and the Most High, you then come to a better understanding of, your own identity and home within you, if that makes sense. I hope people are following this and I'm not confusing folks. But yeah, I came to realize that, like, 10 years later, that transitioning from my father, my earthly father, my dad, being that kind of sense of home, to my heavenly father being my anchor and my sense of home, was one of the, like, best things I could do. And what happens to a lot of people and with a lot of people is they don't figure this out, right? They are born into environments where there may not be any parent. I was fortunate that I had one parent that kind of represented that and established that for me, but there may not be any parent to do that. And you kind of end up moving through life haphazardly, just kind of, aimlessly is probably a better word, aimlessly kind of moving through life, hoping that something will anchor you. And I think this is a lot of the reason why folks end up like using substances and like, chasing after like money and jobs and titles and material things, because they're looking for something to anchor them. They're looking for something to establish identity and like provide them with a foundation. And all of those material things are not lasting, right? Not lasting, not sustainable, never going to provide you with, and I'll even go this far, never going to provide you with what a stable home environment, like a stable family would have provided you, and absolutely positively never going to provide you with what God and the Most High is going to provide you. And what ends up happening when folks take that path is, your entire life, your entire being is impacted by it, right? When your foundation is not sturdy, when your foundation is faulty, every other aspect of who you are is destabilized at that point, right? Think about a tree. If a tree is not firmly rooted, right, every other aspect, component of that tree is susceptible to, imbalance, susceptible to what comes when you're not firmly rooted, right? And so, yeah, like that's like the most important part of having a stable life, a stable existence. And I think another way to look at it, and another way that people kind of talk about this is, through the chakra system, right? When your root chakra is imbalanced, that every other chakra is thrown off, right? Every other energy center is not firing off properly, and that in order to balance your life, you have to focus on the root chakra, healing and clearing that out so that everything else will follow. And so, yeah, so many of us have this wounding around home and our foundations. And I'm grateful that my situation was kind of disrupted last year. I was living with a group of people and completely off track, like completely on the wrong path, and was delivered from it. I can look back on it now and see that it was deliverance. Like God was looking out for me. God was saving me from myself, helping me to become aware of certain things that I wasn't aware of, and helping me to heal, right? This is what the healing is, and I should probably make that clear, right? When I talk about finding a sense of home within God, within the Most High, and then within yourself, that is the solution. That's the healing to the wounding around home. And in my experience, as someone who did, years of therapy, while therapy is helpful to come to an understanding of the problem and to have somewhere to vent and talk about the problem, I don't know that talk therapy or any other therapeutic practice can really do this for you. And I feel like that was one of the reasons why God had to intervene. Like, God had to show up and pull the floor from underneath me, which was very uncomfortable and scary, but positioned me now to really come face to face with this wound around home and this fear around home and this faulty foundation that I've had, so that I can mend, right? I can take the steps that are necessary to establish the healthy foundation, to balance the root chakra, to find a sense of home within myself. And as complicated as it is, as painful as it is, I'm grateful. I'm so grateful. And yeah, I'm excited for what the future is going to bring, right? This is really the beginning for me of turning this around. Like, I'm literally moving through this in real time as I come forward and talk about it. And so that's as much as I can say in this moment, right? I'll keep you updated on, how things work out. But yeah, I'm certainly healing a lot of the codependence that those with woundings around home end up having, because, right, you're not anchored in anything solid, and so you're constantly reaching for, like, people, places, and things that are outside of you, that are temporary. And so definitely a way to heal codependence, get beyond that, to become interdependent, which is, I think, one of the healthiest ways to live. Not independent, interdependent. And yeah, I think I'm going to end this here. I'll be back with updates around this and with more on my healing journey as, realizations come up and I'm inspired to share. Hope this was helpful.